Definitely, we are expecting to hear NUMSA's first president, Basil Cele, who's expected to address some of the striking workers outside here at SAA's headquarters. We understand that the workers have been here from as early as 4 a.m. and they have been picketing here. Earlier on today, they were addressed by the Secretary General, Secretary General Zwelinzima Vavi, who spoke about basically calls to have the former SAA CEO reinstated, as well as called for Minister of Public Enterprises Pravin Gordhan to be removed or to step down from his position. And they're basically saying that the recent plans to downsize the company, as well as the failure for SAA to meet the unions halfway with regards to meeting their demand of 8%, is basically a sign that, you know, they are not really willing to meet them halfway. But you know what, to speak to me about the strike, I am joined by Pamela Majola, who's going to be talking to us about the striking members. Are you happy with the turnout today?
Yes, indeed. As NUMSA and the South African Cabin Crew Association jointly, who are on strike today, we're quite pleased with the turnout. I think you've seen for yourself that there's sort of been waves of workers coming in at different times. Even now, a fresh wave of members have joined the strike, and that just shows you that, you know, in terms of our mobilization, we feel that we've been quite successful. This has been the case not just here at OR Tambo, but at all airports nationally. There's picketing taking place, and the planes are not flying, and I think it's really important that that's the message that we wanted to send. We wanted to send a strong message to management of SAA, the board, and even the government, the shareholder, that we're serious about what we're demanding in relation to the strike.
And have you heard any word from SAA? Are they trying to get hold of you to engage and possibly meet your demand?
What we have is a meeting under the auspices of the CCMA that's going to take place tomorrow. It's a Section 150 mediation which has been called for by the CCMA. They're going to try and get us around the table, and hopefully we'll be able to find one another. So that's going to take place all day tomorrow. But even as that takes place, the strike is continuing. Our members are going to be picketing every day. You can expect more workers possibly even tomorrow. We've also seen some political parties joining us, which is really great. Members of SRWP as well as EFF have come through in solidarity, and we are inviting political parties to come to picket with workers, because this is in all our interests. We can't have SAA collapsing. We can't continue with a board that doesn't care and that is hell-bent on the destruction of the airline. And I think if members of the public were to get involved in this struggle, then we can actually ensure the kind of changes that need to take place at this airline.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. There you have it, Nzinga. That is our NUMSA spokesperson, Pamela Majola. But what's really come up recently are news that I have read about from Bloomberg, where they basically talk about how Minister of Public Enterprises Pravin Gordhan has spoken out against this very strike, saying that unions involved in this are only playing politics, and that SAA is not too big to fail, which essentially means that, you know, if need be, SAA could potentially be sold or something. Where basically it's literally a strong warning to the unions out here picketing here and striking. We also saw in the paper, in the article, where Finance Minister Tito Mboweni talks about how they've been in communication with private equity partners, and this is something that SAA has refuted, saying that they're not in the process. We know that unions have said that the recent restructuring plan is part of a plan to sell SAA. However, this basically confirms that there are talks between, you know, SAA and private equity partners, who obviously need to confirm these allegations with SAA. However, we will be speaking to union leaders later on, just to hear what they have to say regarding this new information that that's just emerged in the papers. For now, though, Arabile, it's over to you.
Well, good afternoon, Mbalente. Look, it certainly is a situation where the unions have had their say, as you've noted quite clearly. They're out here. The queue may have gotten a little bit shorter, but it doesn't necessarily change the scenario at hand, right? Consumers and passengers still struggling to find a way to their respective destinations, and passengers asking the question, why is there insufficient communication? That is the question that is being asked now. We are hoping to get word then from the spokesperson of SAA, Tladi, and we're hoping to perhaps give that to you live as and when it happens. He has said that he will join us perhaps within the hour as well. So hopefully we can get a little bit more in terms of communication there. We've spoken to quite a few passengers who really are at ends, really, trying to understand what is exactly happening. Some of them don't even know exactly why there is a strike or why SAA is not functional at this point in time. So perhaps the communication lines have certainly been blurred and not perhaps given out as right as they perhaps should have been. Even the travel agencies have been questioned as to whether they're communicating with their passengers and their customers as well with regards to these flights. So the question becomes then, what is it that will happen from here on in? 52 million rand a day is what it's costing SAA, a debt pile of more than 9 billion rand as well thus far. One that government has said will certainly try to clear up regarding government guaranteed debt as well. So perhaps we can try and find a way to clear out that scenario too. Overall, though, the question becomes here that we're dealing with not just the unions, but certainly with management as well as a question at hand. How exactly is government playing a hand in all this? Let's remember that earlier this year we had the departure of the CEO, Vuyani Jahana, who had a restructuring plan and a plan to restructure the entity and see it implement that plan, which would perhaps see the company break even by 2021. He then left because he felt that government had not committed itself to assisting him in his pathway. All he needed was 22 billion rand in order to turn the entity negative. He said that in one financial year, you'd find that losses would be around 52 billion rand and then over onto around 20 billion and eventually onto that break-even point. But no government commitment is what he noted out and saw a mass exodus then as well of executives at SAA. It was a very difficult situation as well at the Scope hearing out in Parliament, as the non-executive director then of SAA, that's Martin Kingston, also made note of how we sit in a path where it is difficult for SAA to even continue as a going concern because they're ultimately insolvent. So things are ultimately at their worst end here. But where to then? Where does SAA find the money? You could certainly argue that perhaps a few procurement deals, as the unions have noted out, could be of severe question, of massive question, should I say, and those that perhaps should be re-looked at. Perhaps fuel prices, things like the exchange rate are certainly not helping them either. So that is all the questions that need to certainly be answered. We're hoping to get an update as well as to whether the strike action will affect flights for an added 2 days. We spoke to the spokesperson of SAA a little bit earlier on in the day, Tladi, and he made note that indeed the issue at hand here is that the reason they do it 2 days each is because they want to make sure that even if things are solved within a short notice, they can at least still put in some of their plans in place and don't have to necessarily alter things, especially on a long-term basis. Communication is still being had between the unions and SAA management, and hopefully the impasse can indeed be solved. For now, however, that is the situation right here at OR Tambo International Airport. We'll hopefully get word as well throughout the day, and hopefully we'll give it to you live then. We will cross over now to Durban, where my colleague Ayanda Mhlongo is perhaps seeing a similar situation. The unions also at play on that front, Ayanda.
All right, thanks very much, Arabile, and we're still coming to you from the King Shaka Airport here in Durban, where since this morning it has been pretty quiet outside one of course, just in front of one of the busiest of the airlines, SAA. Very few passengers have been coming through. We are seeing some passengers coming through, and now this seems to be one of the biggest groups that we've seen this morning. But since this morning, what we can tell you is most of the SAA passengers have been turned away, and of course then requested to go to other airlines. We've seen some of them moving from the check-in counters to the ticket sales office, and the few passengers that we've been able to speak to this morning saying that of course they came to find out whether or not there'd been any changes with regards to the strike, but others trying to get assistance from the airline to get alternative flight. We spoke to one passenger from Germany who's been here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and he was saying that they were able to get assistance from him to another airline, but unfortunately he'd have to wait about 3 hours here in Durban before he's able to get that flight. But he was at least happy that he would land in Johannesburg in time for him to get that connecting flight to Germany. And of course other passengers seeming a little bit frustrated, not willing to speak to us. I'm just looking at this big group that we see now, and the possibility, as you said, that most of them are going to be turned away. I did also mention earlier that of course this week in Durban we had 2 international conferences that were taking place, and we are seeing some buses that are now coming through, presumably they're now bringing the delegates. So we were expecting that around lunchtime there was going to be a number of those delegates that were going to be coming through, and whether or not they had enough time from yesterday, of course being involved, busy with the conference, whether or not they did have time to make those alternate arrangements and for them to be able to get alternative flights. But we are awaiting to speak to some of them as they come through. Earlier on we also did speak to one of the NUMSA officials here in KwaZulu-Natal who said they had decided as a union that they were not going to picket or protest outside the airport here today, and of course that is because of the weather conditions here in Durban. They had said that if the strike does continue on tomorrow and the next coming days, that they will then going to gather, and that's going to be on the R102. That's where the striking workers will gather, but that will only take place tomorrow. But as of today, they've asked all their striking workers to stay at home. So we still, of course, stand out here at the airport to monitor the situation and see whether or not those delegates that are possibly going to come through and try to see if we can speak to them. But so far the situation standing the same here in Durban. From now, let me end up things here at King Shaka, and let's go to PE where my colleague Jadely Polsa is standing by.
Here in Port Elizabeth, we have taken you into the Port Elizabeth International Airport, speaking to passengers who have had to route their flights from as early as 7 o'clock this morning, and all the while outside there are SAA members affiliated with NUMSA protesting and picketing, and I suppose with the rest of the SAA members across the country. I'm just going to ask them, Kabisi, my cameraman, to walk with me and for us to speak to them. Now earlier on we spoke to the shop steward Luyanda, who was telling us that there could possibly be an intervention by the CCMA tomorrow, and they will be sitting in a meeting with SAA as well as. But I'm just going to try and speak to some of the members and speak to them and ask them how they're feeling. Ma'am, if I can just speak to you. The pending strike, how do you feel about the retrenchment process? You have been here since 7 o'clock this morning, picketing and protesting. How do you feel? Tell us.
It's very frustrating when you are a mother of 2 children and those children look to you for support, and it's very frustrating where we don't know where to stand.
That's going to move on. And you know, throughout the day we've heard the same sentiments from many of the SAA employees saying that this is just purely unacceptable. Leander, if I could just steal you for 2 minutes. Now there is this meeting that is expected to be scheduled tomorrow with CCMA. Do you have any more information? Has management spoken to the employees?
So far, it's only the indication from the CCMA that they want to mediate on this matter, which is believe that is expected to happen today. But up until then, there's no other development so far. So we will only hear what the outcomes of that meeting tomorrow.
Will you be also stationed here tomorrow to continue the protest?
As we've said, this is an indefinite strike. Up until there's an agreement that is appealing to us as membership, we will still continue here tomorrow. As we have said, there's no end to the strike. It's up to the company. The ball is in their court to end the strike.
Thank you, Leander. Yolanda is a shop steward and affiliated with NUMSA. I'm just going to try one more member over here. We can just speak to some of these ladies. Sorry, ma'am, I can steal you for a few moments. Hi, Unati. The retrenchments, obviously, it's affecting everyone across the country who are working with SAA. Just tell us your story. How are you feeling right now?
At the moment, I'm feeling very angry, and I don't understand why the management is doing this to us, because we've got families to feed, and we've got houses that needs to be paid, and cars. So we're not happy. We're not happy at all.
And that's a lot of the sentiments with the members. But here on the ground, the members have been standing here since 7 o'clock, protesting across the country in solidarity with other SAA employees at the Port Elizabeth International Airport. Several of the flights have been routed to other airlines, and there has been a few delays earlier this morning with those flights, but generally most of the passengers have been able to secure their flights. And that's what we have in Port Elizabeth. What's happening on the other end? It's back to you in studio.
Jade Lee-Porser coming to us from Port Elizabeth, and our teams across the different airports giving you insight into what's happening at the major airports across the country as that SAA strike continues. We are following that story very closely and will be continually updating you.